Hello there, and welcome to Sweet Child of Time. I'm your host, Steve Barnes, and today we are getting into episode 10 of Dark. This is the season ender of season 1. This one's called the Alpha and Omega. And here she is. She is the Alpha to my Omega, the mistress of the dark. It's Lindsay Dunn. Ahoy there, Lindsay.
Ahoy, Steve! Getting biblical on Dark this week with the Alpha and Omega. I know that it's like not necessarily biblical, but it is in the Bible, and it's also like Greek words, and it could be different things. Yeah,
I mean, I think the Bible definitely has a play in the writing of this show. I mean, I don't, let's give it up for religion. Yay!
Yay!
That's a great way to start the show. But yeah, I listening to last week's episode, because I have to edit it, of course, so I have to listen to it carefully. I didn't like all the mean things I was saying about Jonas during the Jonas and Martha rain scene, even though I agree with myself. But I was really happy this episode that Jonas, in my mind, did like a big 180, and he like really came through in this episode. He was not wooden at all. His emotions were all over the place, and I was really happy to see that. So sorry about last week. Here we go for this week.
Fresh start for Jonas.
That's right, yeah. And I keep saying his name wrong because I'm American, Jonas. I got to say it right. Were you loving this episode as much as I was?
Watching it again is a little bit of a different experience. Mm-hmm. I think I remember, I loved this episode because of the reveals, especially the big reveal. But then when you go back and watch it, I still think overall, strong episode, a strong season ender. But it can also be kind of frustrating because you've been watching it with this particular lens. At least I was always watching it with a lens of hope, that Jonas has this idealism that he can change things, and we love that about him. And by the end of the episode, it just kind of continues in the cycle of bleakness and lack of hope, and that can be a hard pill to swallow for our characters. This season finale leaves us in a very dark place, I feel, overall. It's a well-written season finale, but there's just a lot to unpack, and I like it for the writing. And I remember in my first watch how depressed I was at the end of this.
Okay, we I guess we're looking at it from different lenses, because even though I have seen this before, it was parts of it were new to me because I didn't really remember how the Peter and Trant thing ended up. I don't remember any of that Helge stuff. Like, a lot of stuff was brand new to me. I don't know how. I just forgot the first time around. So I really like the way a lot of these things wrapped up. And I almost want to say that if it wasn't for the very ending when Jonas wakes up in the distant future, if you scrapped that scene completely, I can't say that the season would end satisfactory, because you have a lot of loose ends there, especially like with Bartosz and stuff. But it really wraps up very nicely. And you said the writing, and that's what I'm saying too, is the writing. Like, that's the number one thing for this show for me, is the writing. I think it holds above everything else. And I would love if there was a novelization of this show. I'm sure that does not exist, or I would have known about it by now. But I really love the writing. So I think the writer of the show is, it's Bo, correct? Or is it John?
I believe Yantia is actually the main writer, the one that maps out all the plots.
Okay.
That's her wheelhouse. So she's the one that puts everything, storyboards everything, and says this is kind of how it's going to unravel. But then, of course, with Dark, you had to like cut and paste that into like, what are we going to start with? Where are we going to start in the loop? And
right. So yeah, I bet it's really tough to direct. I mean, the direction is great, the editing is great, the sound design. But I guess I'm a number one Yante fan. Then I'm gonna start looking for more of her stuff besides what I already know about. Just because I was really taken with the writing of this last episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm ready to get into the recap because I know it's going to run long. I can already kind of sense that in my timeline. Did you have anything you wanted to go over before we started?
No, that's why I'm being short with my comments, because I'm like, yeah, let's get into it because it's going to be a long night. Yeah.
Well, sure. Right. Yeah, go ahead, Lindsay.
So this episode opens on the day of Mikkel's disappearance. Peter is in the parking lot of the truck stop, and it's pouring down raining, of course, as it always is in Winden. And he's staring at Benny's trailer, and it looks like he would like nothing better than to visit Bernadette at this moment. But instead, he remembers his promise and drives off without getting out of the vehicle.
Right. I thought this was a really interesting scene because I knew it was because they told us it's the night Mikkel's disappearance. So I know that Mikkel hasn't disappeared yet. I'm like, why is Peter, we know by this point that he hasn't fooled around with Benny in like a year. Mm-hmm. So I guess he's more either infatuated or like really has strong feelings for Benny, or something's missing in his life right now. But yeah, it's obvious he wants to pay her a visit. He does not. He goes to the cabin instead, which is a weird choice. Do you have any insight on why he might have chose to drive there?
I mean, I think he had an appointment to go there. They have the book that tells them.
Well, at this point, he did not have the book.
Do we know when they got the book?
This is when they get the book from Claudia, because later on in the episode, when him and Tronte are sitting there 8 days later, Tronte says, yeah, everything in this book that Claudia said was going to happen has happened. And they're thumbing through the book looking at stuff. So I think at this point, they don't have the book yet. Okay. And Peter's just hanging out. I
think this is a nice little bit of storytelling, just my perspective. Mm-hmm. We know that this bunker is where Helge went when he was younger. Right. This is where he hung out as a kid, and he found shelter and refuge. And so I guess the way you could look at it is that Peter has been handed down that legacy from his father. Maybe his father has brought him here. So this is kind of a safe place he can go. Peter doesn't feel safe at home. Charlotte is emotionally unavailable to him. And so he was tempted to go visit Benny. He goes down there. He's slapping himself. He's saying the Serenity Prayer. He isn't ready to go home and be around other human beings right now. So this is a place he can kind of hide out.
Yeah, instead of playing army men, he slaps himself. Yeah, that makes total sense. You're right. Yeah, it's weird that this bunker is a place where these guys gather their thoughts and feel better. That's very interesting going forward. But yeah, okay, I see why now.
Isn't it kind of typical? I don't know, like they talk about the trend of a lot of men like to isolate when they're upset or stressed out. And so I just see that as an extension of that a bunker is a place of safety, right? It's a bomb shelter. It's a place to go when there's war or destruction around you. And so it's a nice little, symbol of this is a place of safety. And even though it's kind of dirty and gross and will be eventually used as a torture chair, torture room.
But you're right. Yeah, most guys do go hang out in their garage, which is also grungy and dirty and stuff. I mean, I hang out in my garage sometimes by myself. You're spot on right there, Lindsay.
He's there with his quiet time, his private time, and this, what do you call it? A crack? There's the book, The Wrinkle in Time. It's almost like a wrinkle in time appears.
Yeah.
I put in the recap a blob, but it isn't even that. It's almost like a fissure in the sky that becomes...
I would say like a tear in the fabric of reality.
That's a good way to put it. So that hole appears, that tear, and a body falls through, and it's Mads Nielsen. Surprise!
Big surprise.
It's kind of nice to see this. In a time travel show, we've been going 33 years in the future, 33 years in the past, and this is like, hey, 8 days ago this happened. We're getting new information we didn't have before. We've been wondering what Peter's up to and all this and why he's so upset. Mm-hmm. Here's the secret he's carrying. Mads is dropped right into his lap, and he checks his badge or his ID tag. He sees that it's Mads. He begins to administer CPR, and he calls Tronte right away, asking. I think the relationship is a little bit interesting because Peter and Charlotte, they're sort of in the age group of like Ulrich,
right,
and Katerina, and Hannah. Those guys are all the same. So I'm like, what's his relationship with Trant before? Peter's a therapist, so
right.
Maybe he's had him for couples counseling, but it's kind of interesting. I'm assuming Peter is younger than Trant, is what I'm saying, and
I guess I'd pick up and say that first off, Peter came to the exact right place at the exact right time, because he actually got to see this body fall from the sky. So you can tell by his facial expression, this is not the kind of thing he ever expected to ever happen. So he's just as shocked as anybody should be in this situation. It is weird that he calls Trant, and he has Trant on speed dial, and I can only assume for the same reason that you gathered, because Peter is like a therapist of some sort. I guess before we can get into anything else, they get a visitor too.
Right, Claudia shows up. But I guess before we talked about her, I wanted to talk about Trant's reaction when he arrives. Before Claudia gets there.
Okay.
Because I feel like that was kind of a remarkable scene, because what have we seen about Trant so far? We saw cool young Trant, but this middle-aged Trant, we know he had an affair. We know that he acts really suspicious, and he's always going out and, lying about cutting the rose bushes.
Right. So, well, they had to move a body though, because Claudia insists they have to move the body of Mads. So that explains, this right here explains one of the reasons he left in the middle of the night, because of this. And
right.
I guess they had to get some rope or something to tie up Mads, and then it might have been like a multi-night situation. It doesn't explain his affair with Claudia, but I think it absolutely explains his behavior, like, for the rest of this episode, and like why he's like so quiet and cryptic, and why Peter is like just can't say what's on his mind, because who would believe them? I mean, everybody would think they're nuts.
Yeah, I think I guess what I'm getting at, though, is just that Trant hasn't been a sympathetic character up to this point. And it's moving to see his reaction to seeing his son's body. He's kind of has a breakdown.
Yeah, he does.
And cries for the loss of his son. We haven't seen him barely express any emotions about anything so far. He's just been kind of lying badly. And so this, makes you kind of have a little different perspective of him.
Yeah, you're right about that. I just kind of glossed over that, I guess, because that's just kind of the reaction that I expected, and he gave it. So I didn't really question it too much, I suppose, from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, with Claudia, she tells them there's a lot to explain, but they need to move the body of Mads to the place it must be found, and they don't have much time to do that.
Right. So it's not just Helge dragging bodies around. They have to do it too, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that is a point that I hadn't picked up on before is like, so far we've been seeing Helge and Noah connected with the boys, and now with Peter and Trant, we had kind of assumed that it's all been Helge moving the bodies around, but in this case it's these two, and they're moving the body and made sure that it would be found the next day.
Right.
Yeah, by Ulrich. So it's like sitting there thinking through their motives, like,
I kind of get it.
Noah and Claudia are supposedly kind of arch enemies and working against each other, but they both seem to be making sure these bodies are found, perhaps for different reasons, but I think that's something to consider as well.
Well, I think it's interesting that Claudia took the body of Mads, because we know that the other two bodies of Eric and Yazan were dumped in 1953. So probably Mads would have been dumped along with them in 1953 as well. And Claudia stopped that from happening by making sure that this body was found in 2019 in order to keep the time loop complete. And she put it in a really obvious spot that, any hiker would find it.
The person that found the body was Ulrich, and we know that it sent Ulrich in a loop of going back to the past and trying to stop the murder. So it's like the power of Claudia is becoming more clear.
Sure
and
is.
It really makes me question her motives and her. Yeah, it's like we've been sort of like Noah, he's the evil guy, but now it's like, well, is Claudia that much better? I mean,
well, I don't know. Just gathering from what I got in this episode, I definitely hold Noah in the worst spot, and I don't see any indication at this point that Claudia's part of Team Evil. It seems like she's more neutral, and she's part of this alignment that has helped these time machines come to be. So I guess I'm not seeing her evil motives at this point. It just seems to me that she's just another time traveler that has a part to play.
Everybody has a motive, though.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to know. I just think, I'm like, what's her motive? What's her... Is she just a selfless individual that wants to help everybody?
Probably not.
So then, November 12th, 8 days after Mikkel's disappearance, Jonas is in bed. An arm comes around him, and this isn't a sexy arm. It's Mikkel.
He looks so cute, though, and he's just smiling so nicely at Jonas here.
Yes, little Mikkel is just staring at him. And then Jonas wakes up and he decides not to take his medication. But he just looks at the nightstand, and he sees the globe light and the radiation detector. Now, he had made a decision in the last episodes. He had been sort of making a decision that he was going to let this whole thing go and tried to distance himself from Marta. So it kind of seems like he's questioning that decision here.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I can see that, especially with the presence of Mikkel next to him.
Yeah. That's true. It doesn't show up as his dad this time. It's cute little Mikkel just staring at him with big brown eyes. Help me. I mean, it did make me jump my first watch, but the second, third, fourth watches, he just looks like nice Mikkel. So no reason to get upset, Jonas. Yeah. Then Marta is in a room with Bartosz, and she has confessed to Bartosz what's happened. And yeah, I guess at this point she's just so upset with Jonas and what he said to her that she's now ready to take comfort in the one person that's been reaching out to her. So she says that she barely recognizes herself anymore. And he gives her a hug and tells her everything is okay, which reminded me a lot of his dad, what his dad does to his mom. Anything else about this scene?
Just it's obvious Bartosz is playing the role of the other guy, and I think he realizes that. He now knows why Jonas stood him up. Jonas stood him up. He knows about the kiss. So he knows that Marta and Jonas aren't together. So he's like, oh, well, I guess it's me now. I don't know. He has anger against Jonas, but I think probably he's not feeling like he's the number one guy right now.
Well, yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's me to point out the obvious to you.
His hair looks good, though.
Always. Dude, he's a stylish guy.
His hair is kind of like young Trance.
Yeah, I can see that. He reminds me so much of an old friend of mine, Jay, who has since passed away, but he was such a good friend to me. And so I see that in Bartosz, and like I want to see all the good stuff because, Bartosz isn't murdering anybody at this point, and he's just, you know, kind of playing the typical teenage kid who doesn't do the right thing all the time. So, yeah, I want to like Bartosz is my point, and I'm kind of not liking him when I should be.
Well, it's like anybody. When you fixate on one thing that you're not getting, you get unhappy. But it's like Bartosz is, he's from a wealthy family. Mm-hmm. He's got nice clothes. He has a really sweet video game system. He could be happy with what he have, but he's he's feeling betrayed by his best friend. He's feeling betrayed by the girl he has the hots for. But you do kind of, I don't know, I feel a little bad for Bartosz in the same way that I felt bad for Hannah in that no one likes feeling like the second choice.
Right.
Yeah. We then cut to Charlotte, who is checking on Helge, and she learns he has run off, and Ulrich hasn't been back. So she kind of says, well, has Ulrich come back to visit? Usually Helge comes back in a few hours, but this time it's different. He's been gone for quite a while.
Yeah, and this is something that he does a lot, according to the nursing staff. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the way she worded Ulrich's interaction with Helge was, he was roughing up Helge as if he had something to do with y'all's missing child case. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the nurse thinks that whole prospect that Helge could have anything to do with that is just absurd because he's dement, right?
Yes. Then Helge wakes up in the deer stand, and it's 1986, and this is the same deer stand that Jonas woke up in.
Yep.
And it kind of just clarifies for us, I think, that, well, we get a better sense of maybe what he's there to do.
Right, sure. And we know, what he's close to as well.
Yeah. So then Jonas is talking with Inez and trying to gather what she knows. And he figures that she knows quite a bit. He calls Mikkel the boy from the future, which I thought was interesting. He doesn't say Mikkel or my father. He says the boy from the future.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I thought that was interesting, too, how Jonas got that phrase. I don't know where he got that phrase from.
So I think we get a little insight into Inez here that she suspected things, but she really just thought he was a depressed little boy that wasn't really able to express what had happened to him.
Sure.
And so she just kind of tried to help him forget.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I mean, how would she have any indication that he was from the future? I mean, there is no indication. There's no clues. He didn't have anything to hand her to blow her mind. You know what I mean? I think eventually she figured it out, but at this stage of their relationship, she would have no way of. There's no proof or no indication at all that he's anything but just a lost child.
Yeah. I think this scene is one of my favorites because it really aggravates me. And it has everything to do with Jonas. I mean, Ines is really acting exactly like we thought she would. She's in the side of who am I to play God, and kind of like you never know what God will do with things, and maybe there's hope and all that. It's very much like part of a Christian worldview, I would say, of like good can come out of anything. And so she didn't see it as helpless, but he's kind of like, why didn't you do anything to stop this? And he mentions like, you could have saved Mikkel. But his comments really make you realize he's really thinking about himself.
That's right.
And he's upset about a lot of things. And he's like, I kissed my aunt, and my dad is doing this, my mom is doing this, and I have these grandparents now. And he makes this statement that everybody's okay but me.
Right.
Which I think is wild because
Yes.
nobody is okay.
Yeah, in your recap, you lay out a bunch of examples, and pretty much everybody has something going on that's very much not okay. And in Jonas's eyes, everybody is fine except for him. Whereas I think that if everybody else were to be asked, how's Jonas? They would probably say he's fine. His father passed away, or about four months ago, but he seems like he's coping okay. Jonas on the outside probably appears fine to them as well, maybe as much as they appear fine to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He takes bike rides and...
Yeah. Like from an outsider's perspective, he's just a really, internal kid. Mm-hmm. But yeah. You were saying you were mad. I'm going to just butt in real quick before we get further. That I was mad at Jonas when he said that Ines didn't do anything to help, that she should have saved Mikkel. Jonas, she did. She did save Mikkel. I mean, she helped him more than anybody else. So don't yell at Ines.
I think I just saw it as interesting that people do tend to do this. They kind of see the world from their perspective only.
Yeah.
They're like, my life sucks and everybody else is fine, which is rarely true. Like they say everybody, I hate sayings like that, but they say everybody's fighting a silent battle. But I mean, yeah, Oryx's in prison and Katerina knows her husband's cheating on her. It's like everybody's life is pretty rough in Winden right now, but he's thinking mainly about himself, even though he's also thinking about Mikkel, but, he's mostly aware of how this has impacted him and how kind of sick it all is. So, yeah, I see, Ines, you're like, don't yell at her. But on the other hand, it does seem like she sort of hoped it would all go away. She did help Mikkel. She was the one that reached out to help him, and she did that for a kind reason. But yeah,
she was also paying the electric bill too. I mean, we know that now. That was her house. So,
and she also shows Jonas the letter. That's pretty interesting.
Exactly,
the letter he burned.
That's a great. I almost forgot about that point of this scene. Yeah, that's probably one of the key points of this scene. So, Lindsay, I'll let you continue.
Well, I don't know. I think that she shows in the letter, we mentioned how he burned the letter. So he says, this is impossible. And she's like, what do you mean? He's like, I burned it. So there you go. Proof of time travel right there. But I mean, only Jonas can see it. I don't know if Ines really registered that fact.
I mean, I think by this point she probably is on board with the time travel thing, like growing up with Mikkel, and as Michael grows up, and then as young Mikkel is born down the street. We don't see any of that, of course, but I kind of get the sense that she's aware now that he was from the future all along, even before Jonas showed up at her doorstep today.
Yeah. Well, the next scene is her with Mikkel in 1986. Did you want to say anything else about the Jonas conversation before we move into that?
Just the only other note I have here is what is normal? Because Jonas just wants everything to go back to normal. So what is normal? What exactly do you want, Jonas? Do you want a new dad? I mean, what is this?
There is nothing normal about Winden, I think, is what we need. You know,
and I guess before we go to Inez and Mikkel, we should take a quick break, Lindsay.
Okay.
All right. We'll be right back. Inez and Mikkel in 1986.
Mm-hmm. Hey, everybody loves Mikkel's magic tricks.
Yeah.
So we get to see this again. Inez, the same trick he showed his dad, where you hide an object under 2 cups. And he's also talking about Houdini and how he wanted to be a magician. And, she asks him if he also wants to be a magician. And he says he does, but the magic he wants to do is not possible because he wants to wake up.
God, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And then there's this Master Zhuang's paradox, where a person dreams he's a butterfly and wakes up. Now he's not sure if he's a person who dreamt he was a butterfly or a butterfly who dreamt he is a person. And which are you? And Mikkel says he is both.
Of course he says that. He's a he's a little scamp. What else would he say here? I like that she brought up that cool paradox. I was not aware of that phrase or paradox, so it's kind of cool that she is.
Yeah, this seems like the kind of thing that would appeal to him, the kinds of conversations he would have with his dad.
Yep.
But it's actually a very sad... I like it too, but I feel very sad when I watch this scene because his face is so sad.
Yeah.
And just the thought that little Mikkel, this is how he grew up, that, here he's, 8, 9, 10, I can't remember how old he's supposed to be here, but from this, for 33 years, he was kind of like, is this real life?
Right.
Was my life in the past the real life? Or is this actually the real life and I was dreaming that other life?
Yeah, it's a real mind blower, and he has a real active imagination as it is. So his mind is probably real and more so than the average person's would be in this situation.
Yeah. It's just going to make me depressed if I think about it too much. So let's go on to 1953.
To a less depressing subject. Jail.
Oh, yes. That's actually one of my, and I think your favorite scenes.
Yeah.
1953, baby. Rock and roll in Winden. We have Ulrich having his mugshot taken.
Right.
With Egon overseeing the whole thing. And Egon tells him his name is Egon Tiedemann. And Ulrich just begins to laugh and he quotes the lyrics from Creator's Pleasure to Kill. Yeah, I mean, this is a loop. These lyrics, they keep quoting these lyrics to each other. Mm-hmm. My only aim is to take many lives, the more the better I feel. And Egon says, "Are you a Satanist?" Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's
no,
Egon for you.
Ulrich says, "No, I'm a cop."
Same thing.
Yeah. And then Egon's asking him about the missing boys, and Ulrich is like, no, I stopped the murders. If you let me out, I can prove it.
I didn't kill those boys. I saved them. That doesn't sound good. It sounds like you killed them.
What did you do with Helge? Yeah. And they're going to lock him up because he's not giving... They want to know where Helge is, and Ulrich is like, no, he must still be alive. And
Right.
So then he ends up verbally assaulting Egon about his future as a drunkard whose wife will leave him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if maybe Ulrich's words here resonated with Egon, and he was like, maybe I'll become an alcoholic and have troubles with my wife. Obviously, that wasn't the case. We don't see Egon having troubles at this point in the show. It looks like he's just a family man who's also on the job a lot. But yeah, I love how he reached over to Satanism real quick, and it's funny that these lyrics are the lyrics that transgress time, because although I'm a big Creator fan, like this is not a great set of lyrics. It's just I guess it's just the phrase along with what's happening in Winden right now just makes Egon really uneasy.
Yeah. So it makes this stuff blows my mind kind of, because I'm like, okay, did 1986 Egon remember this interaction with Ulrich when he hears those lyrics, or is it like subconscious? Because he doesn't say like, I heard that from a man once when he doesn't say that to young Ulrich.
He doesn't, but I think he associates those lyrics with old Ulrich and like this, this possibly satanic guy. And then when he hears the same lyrics coming from this young boy's room, like 33 years later, he's like, it's kind of like sense memory, or smell memory, like when you smell something and it takes you back and you have that same feeling that you had when you first smelled it. Mm-hmm. So it's like he's hearing these lyrics and he's like, this is obviously the first time that Egon has actually heard these lyrics in a song. So it probably really took him back to that time, and that's when he starts being really weird to Ulrich too.
Yeah. But this is such I don't know, poetic justice. I mean, for Ulrich, he's like, of course, like, it's gonna be you. You're the one that's gonna be here questioning me. The bane of my existence is here once again. Yeah, the music is amazing too in this scene. It's like so evil, like roll.
Yeah, the sound design in all of this is just out of the world. Ben Frost just does it. I think like later on I write his name during a scene because all I could think about was the music in the background during it and how perfect it was with the scene. And we'll get to it. I'll say it when it comes.
Yeah. And then we move into 2019. Jonas arriving at Winden High School, and Bartosz is waiting for him in the rain with his hoodie up. Mm-hmm. And he's super pissed and confronts Jonas and tells him, like, hey, I've been such a good friend to you and covered for you. Mm-hmm. And this is how you repay me. And Jonas is kind of hangdog until Bartosz insults his dad. And, and then they end up having a tussle. And
wet tussle.
Marta comes outside and tries to break them up and does break them up.
Yeah.
And then Jonas just sees her and just runs away, basically.
Well, Bartosz tells him to get out of here. Is like Bartosz like in charge of the school? That's what I was wondering. It's like, get out of here, never come back.
He's the prince of Winden. His mother's the queen. He's the prince of Winden.
I guess so. Yeah, this scene is rough. The boys are no longer friends anymore, obviously.
Yeah.
This scene really reminded me of Zoolander, because I don't know if have you seen Zoolander?
It's been a while, but yes.
You must remember the scene when they were a bunch of wet boys at the gas pump having a great time, and they were like all wet. That's what this reminded me of, because it's like, two really well dressed, nice boys all wet rolling around on the ground, and I think it's just how nice they looked in their designer clothes is what really did it for me. Yeah.
I don't know. I really like this scene too, and I can't even really say why, but I just like how they filmed it. It's raining. We're following him. He walks up to the school. Bartosz is kind of that out of focus, and then they move closer, and it's got a very a lot of things in this show feel larger than life, but they've placed us in this world with mythology. So it almost makes Jonas and Bartosz out to be these epic heroines that are like fighting in the weather elements. They're like gods that have come down to earth. Yeah.
I'll go with you on that one. Yeah, sure. They love to have like makeup faces, like have like scars on people's faces. And so now Jonas, for the rest of the episode, he's got a beat up face too, thanks to Bartosz.
Yeah. Oh, Bartosz, you planted a good sucker there.
Bartosz was winning the fight. I hate to say it, that after watching it multiple times, Bartosz was absolutely winning. If Martha hadn't stepped in, it would have been Bartosz. Mm-hmm. So time...
All that I guess video games do help train you.
Maybe.
I don't know. So now the stranger is entering the shop of H.G. Tannhaus, and Tannhaus shows him that he has fixed the machine, and there are now two versions of the same machine. Tannhaus says it's the same machine in two different conditions.
I was trying to puzzle my brain, trying to figure out how these two machines came to be, and I guess we don't know at this point.
Yeah.
I couldn't follow the logistic path of it, so hopefully we'll find out in season 2.
Yeah.
But I did really love...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say the same thing you said already. I loved how one of them was like bright and shiny and new. One of them is old, been sitting on the shelf for a long time. They have differences in them, and like Tannhaus learns from those differences.
So when I had written my original recap, I thought that these were two different machines, and I actually got a comment that told me, no, it's not. It's actually the same machine in two different conditions. So that was a point I had to be clarified on.
Okay. But, like the letter got burnt, but then it shows up and it's new. The machine got old, and then it shows up and it's new. That makes sense.
Yeah, and remember the speech about when we can see things at the beginning and the end.
Of course.
We see them in two different forms.
Yes.
The one you didn't like.
Well, I mean, don't put words in my mouth now.
Yeah, but the Tannhaus, that's what Tannhaus says here. He's like, what if we could see things at the beginning and the end? And he shows them the two machines. So this is like an example of that. Just like we had Helge in 3 different versions, and he mentions that the future, the past informs the future influences the past. If the stranger hadn't brought this machine in, he wouldn't have built it or been able to figure out how it worked.
If he didn't have that machine he brought in, then he wouldn't have had that old one to pull off the shelf and compare it to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes doesn't make total sense, but it's clicking. Yeah. It's clicking, I should say.
Well, it's not so much that it makes sense, but it's kind of like, it connects to that idea that we had that was sort of left lingering in the air, and now the pieces kind of fall into place about why it's also like Bo and Yantja explaining to us how their time travel works, how they're choosing to represent time travel, which is great because so many writers struggle to do things without being like exposition city, and they just put it as part of a plot. So I love that.
I do too.
Yeah. And then we find out we find out the cell phone talks to the machine and that there are these valves that, we don't know what to do with these valves. And then the stranger pulls out the vials and the tubes. And we learn that this stuff is CS137, a radioactive isotope of cesium. And this is what was in those yellow barrels. And Tannhaus gets all excited and says, "It makes a Higgs field."
I mean, I'm excited too. This is like the most kick-ass scene ever. I loved it.
Yeah. It's just so funny because he's such a science nerd, These science nerds just kind of like nerding out about stuff.
All the different time periods have like affected this machine. Like if that accident hadn't happened in the nuclear power plant, then they would not have this cesium-137. Mm-hmm. And if Ulrich hadn't left his jacket there in the shop, then they wouldn't have the cell phone to like make it work. And if Claudia hadn't waltzed in, then they wouldn't have the blueprints to make it work. So, I mean, I just love how like the future and the past is like informing the making of this machine.
And it's kind of like he is like, what? It's not quite working yet because of these valves, and I don't know what to do. Well, the stranger just happened to have the stuff there, like the missing piece, and now the machine works. So it's like everything coming together. What do they call that? Kismet, or like, fate. All the stars align at once.
Yeah, synchronicity.
The cesium like expands in mass and becomes this little mini black hole. And the stranger says, "Why did you decide to help me?" And he mentions that he has a feeling that his whole life is boiled down to this one moment, that he's part of a puzzle, and that he shouldn't stop anything from happening. And it's that old like predeterminism / fate versus free choice. Tannhaus is like, "This is my role, so I'll do it." And the stranger is more like, "I'm going to try to change something."
Yeah, they make it very clear, like in just like 2 sets of dialogue, that's how Tannhaus is. He goes with what's going to happen, and Jonas is, or the stranger here, spoiler alert, is all about, changing things. He even says so at the end here. "I hope it's going to be better now." Which is...
Then there was that... I was going to say, there was also that previous speech that Tannhaus had about, "I feel like this... I used to have dreams, but now I know I'm here for a reason." So he kind of says that twice.
Yep.
In different ways.
Yeah. I mean, I love when he said that he's... his exact words were, "I'm part of a puzzle that I neither understand nor have any influence over." And I don't know, that phrase like really struck me personally because I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's similar to what Inez said.
It's exactly. Let things play out, Jonas.
So Charlotte calls Peter again about his father and does her signature entry where she just calls him and dives right in with a question. And then Peter tries to talk to her and she jumps off the phone quickly. She's in and out.
I'm glad this is the last time we have to see this. Because, I mean, yeah, me and Heather were laughing watching this. Like, oh my God, she's doing it again. How is she ever going to stop to listen to Peter ever? Now that we know he has something really important to say, we really want him to say it. And she's not letting him. But I think I made this point to Heather when we were talking after this episode that it almost kind of works in a way, because if he had told her, it would have opened up a whole different line of questioning and a whole different line of thought, and she might not have made the discovery that she's about to make if if Peter had told her about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Peter seems... this is what I will say for Peter. He's figured out the best way to converse with Charlotte. Send her a text.
That's right. He does do that at the end. It took him all season to figure that out.
She can't. I mean, but like, yeah. He says he did keep saying, "I need to tell you something. I need to tell you something." He did try that a few times, but his text just says, "Come to the cabin. We need to talk."
Right.
But it's a declarative statement. But I was like, yeah, you can't talk to her on the phone. You just have to send her a text like, "Come to cabin." Yeah. All right. So then in 1986, middle-aged Helge comes to the cabin and finds old Helge sitting on his steps.
Odd.
Yeah. And old Helge is trying to tell younger Helge, you need to stop. He is using you. His promises are lies. He isn't the chosen one, and you aren't the chosen one. And they're sort of checking each other out, and they notice each other's ears. And old Helge starts to get forceful about it and he's almost doing a Noah thing. He like grabs him and hugs him.
Yeah. I'll pull you in real tight and won't let you go.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's where Helge learned that, right? I mean, he learned it from Noah. Probably. He knows that's how to get himself to listen.
Maybe so. You might be right. I was thinking this takes place just a couple days after, or maybe the next day after Helge and Noah had that interaction with the screwdriver, and Helge was really conflicted. And so now we have old Helge showing up to pretty much confirm all of his fears, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But it's hard to know how to read this because he was already feeling conflicted about it, but as soon as he tries to tell himself kind of what he feared, he's like, "No, I'm not ready to listen to it yet." And he runs off.
He does run off. Yes, runs away. Instead of confronting. And yeah, I thought it was interesting too, his words. Of course, he's saying you have to stop. And he's talking about, Noah on the surface. Stop messing around with that guy. Stop doing what you're doing. But then I almost wonder if he might have meant literally, you have to stop. When you're in your car at a stoplight, you have to stop and don't move anymore.
That's deep, Steve.
It is. I'll talk about it more when we get there.
Jonas is in his dad's studio. So he's come from Inez, had their conversation. He's in his dad's studio. And this scene, it took me a few times to understand this. He was looking up at the skylight, and I was like, okay, why are you looking at the skylight, dude? And then I realized that's where his dad hung himself.
Yes.
So he glances up, and then he comes downstairs and Hannah is there, his mom, sitting at the table. And she asks him where he's been, and he tells her he got into a fight, and then hugs her and says, everything will be okay. It's like the Bartosz / Alexander method again. This scene kind of cracked me up because I was like, all right, I bet you're all wet, Jonas, and his raincoat was all dirty, and he gives Hannah this big hug, and I'd be like, ugh, back up. But she hugs him back, and it looked like she learned how to hug this time. Definitely. It wasn't as awkward for her.
She did hug back. There was no hesitation this time.
Yeah.
It dawned on me too that, when you said he was looking up at the skylight, looking at the beam, I think it's at this point he makes a decision to not just let things lie, to make an active role in changing the future.
Yeah.
And he lies, says he's going to school, that he forgot something, but we know that's not where he's going.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this whole episode, he gets the vision of Mikkel. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to I was counting on my finger, so I think it's kind of loud. But he was he sees Mikkel and kind of wants to help him. He talks to his grandmother and is thinking, again, mentions, you could have helped Mikkel. And he's like, nobody else is going to help this kid, so now I'm going to try to do it.
Yeah, to stop that suicide from happening. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was looking at this scene as a parent of a 17-year-old, because I think Jonas is about 17, I would guess. Maybe he's 15, but I don't know, in that range somewhere. I was wondering how I would feel like if my daughter Charlotte came home and she had her face beat up, and she was like, I was like, you got in a fight? Who with? It doesn't matter. She tells me it doesn't matter, and then she gives me a big hug, and then she says everything's going to be okay, and then she leaves the house. I would be alarmed. I would think she was having a bipolar episode, and it would not be comforting. It would be alarming. So I think Hannah should be alarmed here, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but these days, she's just sitting around smoking, sadly. I mean, that's how she's spending her time. She doesn't have the energy to be like you, Steve.
Be like me.
You know, you've got your wits about you. You're like, you're like, I would be a good parent to my child. Hannah's not in a place to be a good parent to her child right now.
Well, I guess if that's the bar, then yeah, I've jumped over that bar.
So then we're still in 2019. Trant and Peter are in the bunker. And Peter mentions that Charlotte asked him about the cabin and Helge and what happened in 1953. And then Trant says, just a few more hours and Mads will live.
Huh?
Yeah. They seem to be talking about Claudia. They say, like, do you believe her? And
Right.
They seem to be talking about Claudia, who has made them some promises. And then Peter is like, do you believe her? And Trant is like, everything she said would happen according to this book. And he like points at the book, like very emphatically.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, yeah, like I trying to piece this too. It's like, okay, so you think that Mads is going to live after a few hours, things are going to change somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get why he thinks Mads is going to be alive. I get that. They're following this book, and like we saw before, like at 9:17 the lights started flickering, and the book indicated that at 9:17 the lights would flicker. I remember that scene really well, and this is what they're going by. So everything is lining up with this book.
Yeah.
I wonder if it says in the book somewhere something about Mads, because...
Yeah. Well, this is what I mean about me questioning Claudia, because she seems to have made them these promises that Mads is going to live, and that is why they're down there doing what they're doing. She's like somehow convinced them that we need to help his body to be found, and then let things play out, and then everything will be okay.
Well, I kind of... all that stuff kind of tracks, actually. Like, Claudia's kind of right in that respect. And if she promised Trante that Mads would be back, that of course is deviant. That's not right. We don't know if she did that or not, though. That seems to be what Trant believes. Maybe she did like some double speak or something. And like Trant was like, "Can you bring my son back?" And she said something like, "We can make the past right."
All will be well.
Right.
All will be well. Yeah, we didn't see them actually have the conversation with her, but I guess I do wonder what she's told them.
Sure. And yeah, obviously Trant thinks that after today, everything will be new, which is a really neat concept, like that we've just been retreading things, and then like at one particular date, that's when new things can happen. That's when we have opportunity. I love that Trant was like holding on to that hope.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is what Bartosz also said of Noah. Everything you said would happen, happened.
They had that same book. I guess it was the same book.
Yeah. Is it like The Machine, where it's the same book in two different conditions?
Well, yes, because when Noah has the book, it's all nice and new looking. And when they're having it here, like, I think one of them says, like, there's a bunch of pages ripped out.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So, which means they only have part of the information. Yeah. So, 1986, Helge and Noah have one of their talks where Helge questions Noah and Noah talks Helge down.
Helge is really easily led, right?
I mean, this is the person he looks to for guidance. Father Noah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He says, if there is no God, why do we believe a lie? And then Noah tells Helge a story about a man that lived with his family, a boarder. He used to talk in his sleep, but one day he clearly said, nothing is in vain, not a single breath, not a single step, not a word, not pain, an eternal miracle of the one.
Yes.
And he's basically saying that your pain is who made you, your pain has made you who you are today. And, but this, we also see like Jonas, we see Marta and Katerina, we see Hannah, Egon, HG. And so we're also thinking about their pain.
Right.
Yeah.
I got a few things about this scene, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
This was the scene that, and I wrote down here Ben Frost, because this is the scene where I noticed the music like predominantly. And then I also wrote down Noah, because I remember like every time we see Noah, we get this we get these cool sound cues. And in this instance, we get like some really, really cool, like deep cues anytime when they start mentioning Jonas, and when they say who's next and they says Jonas, and then the music does something that it's never done before, and it has like this really neat effect to it, which, you know, when they said that, I wasn't expecting this, because even though it's a rewatch, I'd forgotten about this. So yeah, it made my stomach like drop, like when they said Jonas and this music accompanied it. I mean, I think I was complaining to on another podcast about how I hate when like movies like will play with my emotions, like with music cues and stuff. And here's Dark doing it, and I don't hate it. I love it.
Is it the one where he's like, is it that one? Or is it
it does like a lot of cutting in and cutting out. So it's like a lot of reverb happening.
Yeah.
What else did I have about this scene? I also had, he's saying that nothing is wasted. Nothing is in vain. Every breath, every pain. So I wish he would remind Helge that it's not just the pain that has made him who it is. It's everything that's made him who it is. Every emotion, his like doubts, his insecurities, his happiness, and his joy. I mean, every breath is supposed to count here, according to this guy that lived above Noah. So I wish that they would take that into account too. But he tends to just focus on the pain is what made Helge what he is. And I didn't like that perspective.
Yeah.
And it also makes you wonder who that guy was. He has to play a part in this show, I would hope.
Yep. Yeah.
And I have two contenders. The first contender is Jonas, of course, because when he starts talking about the person with sad eyes, they immediately cut to Jonas. So you're like, oh, is he talking about Jonas? But then I'm thinking, well, maybe he's talking about himself. Maybe it was like himself in the past, like his adult self that encountered his younger self and was kind of guiding him even back then. I don't know if we ever get the answer to who this person was that lived above Noah, but I'm just guessing it's one of those two guys.
Mm-hmm. Does he say sad eyes here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I need to go back and look for that, because somebody was reading a different recap and somebody mentioned a line about sad eyes, but I watched this scene several times and I didn't see him say that, so I need to revisit that.
Okay. Well, he said it in German, so I read it. So if that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Or maybe, it could have been in the version that me and Heather watched, because we watched it in English. Maybe the English person said sad eyes, but maybe the...
yeah, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll go back and listen to the scene in English. One other little thing I wanted to point out that I thought was really cool about this scene is when Egon, they show Egon, he opens the little window and looks at Ulrich. And in 1986, Egon did that too. He opened the little window and looked at teenage Ulrich.
That's right.
And Man. I was just like, dang, this show is so amazing.
He had him in his clutches twice.
Yes. I just like, it's these little tidbits that keep me up at night, thinking about Dark. All right, so then 1986, Jonas comes out of the cave. He is walking enthusiastically. He's made a decision. He's going to go get Mikkel. No one can stop him now.
Yep.
Yes. He goes to the hospital, and we go to the hospital. Before Jonas goes there, the CPS worker comes to pick up Mikkel for the children's home, and she tries to speak to him, but he's on the bed, unresponsive. And Inez makes a decision right then and there that she wants to adopt Mikkel and take custody of him while the adoption is being processed.
Good call. And she's like, he likes me, I like him, I have a house, case closed. And I agree with her. Of course.
Yeah. Now, we get a scene with young Charlotte.
Yes, this is where I thought we were heading.
Yeah, Charlotte's in the woods, sketching the dead birds, practicing to catch serial killers, not be a serial killer.
That's right. That's right. Because she wants to bring them back to life, so she's a good person.
Yeah. Jonas asks what year it is. It seems like it's one of his favorite questions. He tends to ask. A lot of our characters do. And she wants to know if he's from there. He says no, but he's come to bring someone back from the dead. She wants to know if he can bring back the birds, and he says no, because you have to do it when they are young.
Yes.
And then she says, you're weird, or you're crazy, or something.
Both are appropriate. He is weird and crazy. But I like this scene for two reasons. Because first off, she's dressed like Helge. That's the first thing I noticed, is she's dressed just like old Helge. And then also that we have the dead birds again, except for, she's drawing them, just like I said, like a cool artist would do. And she also has a little bit of pity for them, because Jonas is talking about bringing back the dead, and she's like, how about these birds? It'd be great if they were alive. So, she's not a psycho. She's just an artist.
So you're saying Charlotte is dressed like old Helge?
She's dressed like old Helge.
Yeah, because of like the hat and everything.
Yeah, the oversized jacket, the stocking cap, the pants. It's like the exact same wardrobe choice.
Mm-hmm. That is cool. Yeah, we never meet her parents.
I guess not. Yeah. Wait, Charlotte Doppler. No, we don't. She's not. Do we know her maiden name yet?
It might be on the Dark Wiki, but I don't have it in front of me.
I bet her parents were cool. That's all I got to say.
So then in 2019, older Charlotte is in front of a machine at work. I guess she's studying old newspaper clippings, and she finds a story about Helge, and then finds the mugshot taken of Ulrich. The headline reads, "Is this man a child murderer?"
Yeah, this is a wonderful scene too. A great picture of Ulrich in all his glory. And obviously they don't know his name. He didn't reveal his name at all, because they just call him "Did this man." So he didn't give anything up at all. Even after he was beat down, he didn't tell him nothing. Mm-hmm. And aren't you this scene was probably like in a library, right? Isn't this like microfiche or microfilm or something they're looking at here?
It is, but I didn't jot this down. I thought they had records like this at work, but you think she was at the library?
That's the only place I've seen those machines, is in libraries. And I mean, I've been in like 911 centers and police offices and things like that. I've never seen one of these maybe they have it in the basement. I haven't been in the basement.
I mean, I think she was just looking for information about young Helge, maybe?
Yeah, that's exactly what she was doing, because she had like the information about Helge's like car accident on the board. And I think that was her key word, was Helge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or Helg. We should be calling him Helg, because that's what they call him in the show. But we always say Helge.
Well, yeah, Charlotte is surprised. As surprised as Charlotte gets. Nothing seems to throw her very much.
Except for Katerina and old pictures of Ulrich.
Katerina and occasionally her daughter's sassy comments.
Right. Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
That's when she came out. That's when we see the most vivid Charlotte, is when she's talking to her kids, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In 1953, 3 men enter Ulrich's cell. It's Daniel Conwald and 2 armed guards. Daniel wants to know where Helge is, and Ulrich isn't going to tell because he's afraid that if he does, that Helge will live. So he gets beat up. He gets a really good beating.
He does. The man in the tie, you say that is on Daniel Conwald?
The main dude that came in.
Yeah, the well-dressed guy that said, where's Helge? I didn't know that was Daniel Conwald. I assumed that he was just like one of, or maybe he is. I assumed he was one of Burnt's, like, security guard goons from the power plant.
No, he's the same one we've seen. He's the main, and he's like Egon's employer. Interesting,
though. Daniel. Okay, Conwald. So, what relation is he to Jonas and Hannah?
Well, he's Inez's dad. We've talked about him before.
We have, but it's things are starting to click now, like they didn't click before.
So, I guess it would be Jonas's great grandfather.
Jonas's great grandfather beating up Jonas's grandfather.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was trying to get to. Is like these two guys are related, but they don't realize it.
Well, Ulrich is on. Mikkel's adopted. I mean, he's not really right.
Well, Mikkel was actually born though, like as a, from Ulrich and Katerina, the little Mikkel that we know.
Well, yeah, but the Conwalds and the Nielsen's are not related.
No, I'm just saying
they're married. Yeah,
they have a direct relation, I guess is what I mean. They have like a Venn diagram that connects these guys.
They're both related to Jonas, but it's 2 different sides of the family.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. 1986, Jonas enters Mikkel's room and finds Noah sitting in a chair next to the bed, and Noah says, "Who are you?" And Noah does the shushing symbol.
Oh, yeah.
And then Jonas gets drugged.
He gets B.A. Baracus. Do you remember who B.A. Baracus is?
No.
Oh, do you remember the A-Team, that old TV show from the 80s?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Mr. T played a character, B.A. Baracus, and the only way they could get him to fly was if they took a white rag, dipped it in chloroform, and like did this to him, knocked him out, and then he could fly. So that's what I thought of when I saw this, is Jonas got B.A. Baracus.
Oh, this is what we need to do with my dad, because he's also afraid of flying.
It's exactly what you do. I mean, there's also stuff like Xanax that works as well.
Oh, boy. Okay. Yeah, we didn't really mention that, when Noah had said, Jonas Conwald is our next target.
That's right.
And we're kind of like, uh-oh, we don't want that. Not Jonas.
Oh, we did mention that, because remember I said my stomach dropped, and I felt a tingle. And the music cued.
Okay. Well, I must have missed it. I thought it was a different kind of tingle, not a Jonas tingle.
It was a Jonas.
I thought it was a different type of fear. Yes. So Jonas wakes up in the blue wallpaper room. No, Jonas.
No, I don't like this. I mean, I love this scene. I mean, this might be like my favorite scene of the season, perhaps. Because like when I think about Dark, I think about this scene more than anything else. So please continue, because I love it.
So he calls for help and is answered by the stranger, who's outside the cell but won't let him out. And the stranger tells him that the machine, and actually the room itself, is an early prototype of the time machine, but they, meaning Helge and Noah, can't get it to work yet. So they keep experimenting on the boys.
Right.
And Jonas is the latest guinea pig. This room is, and we already kind of suspected this, but it's directly under the Sickmundus tunnel.
Above the Sickmundus tunnel.
So whenever... What?
It's above the Sickmundus tunnel.
Above the tunnel?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Sickmundus tunnel runs underneath of the bunker, the blue room, right?
Okay. Well, they're above or below each other.
Sorry.
Above or below. Isn't that part of the alchemy?
What is above, so is below.
Yeah. So the when the tunnel is opened, energy is released in the room, but it has to be harnessed and amplified.
Right.
Yeah, so he says, no DeLorean. The first
I love that.
time travel machine is a room with 4 walls.
Yep.
Yeah. I like totally missed that joke until this watch, Steve. I've been so focused on other details that I was like, DeLorean totally like went over my head.
You're like, that's a legit time machine. Yes, that checks.
Yeah. So then we have the big reveal of the entire season.
Yes.
That the stranger is Jonas.
Yes.
And he says, Ich bin du. Which is a great line in German.
It is. And he
not
delivers
quite
it
as
great.
not quite as good as Helge Estement, but
well, I think this line is more powerful.
Yeah. Okay. So that, he can't let him out because he needs to leave him in there because he has to go through everything.
Right.
Jonas has to go through everything he has, which is a lot like that nothing is wasted stuff Noah was spitting out before.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it intersects. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Jonas just begs the stranger, and the stranger is like, nope, sorry.
Well, he's not all like that.
He seems a little bit sympathetic.
He does. Yeah, he was like listening outside, and this really reminded me directly from being a parent and raising a colicky child. Caleb had a lot of colic when he was young. So there was a good amount of, everything is totally fine, but he's screaming his head off for no reason. So, not screaming his head off, you know what I mean. Baby's crying, but everything checks out. Everything's good. So you leave him in his crib and you leave him be and let him cry himself to sleep. That's an old method that we used 26, 27 years ago. And it reminded me a lot of this because you would stand outside, you being me, would stand outside my son's room while he's crying himself to sleep. And I feel like the biggest asshole in the world because he doesn't want me to pick him up or anything. So all I can do is just let him go about his business. And I know it's for the good. I know that in the future that my son will be fine and he'll be able to put himself to sleep. But it's really hard to stand there and hear him scream. So Jonas having to sit there and hear the younger version of himself, beg for help and cry and plead, and it's awful, and it's got to be one of the toughest decisions of his life, and that he knew he had to come to this point. Something that confused me, first something that amazed me is like when he's talking about the energy that's harnessed in this room when the doors are open and they're trying to like capture that power. I mean, it's obvious that there's like a lot of energy in this room and a lot of like amazing doesn't always mean good. A lot of amazing things happen in here. And we see a lot of, later on when we see Charlotte and Peter like embracing in this room, I couldn't help but think about the room that they were in while they were doing it, and this is the same room that Jonas sees himself in 2 different time periods. I I just love the fact that like this spot just has so much like weird energy and history. So that's what amazed me.
Right.
What confused me was when older Jonas said something about like the same, where we follow the same path again and again. And he kind of made it sound like, you know, things are happening multiple times, but really everything is just happening once as time progresses. It's just the future is dictating the past, which affects the present, but everything is happening one time. Right?
There's more to know in the future. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like he's remembering how painful this moment was for him. I think is something you latched onto, that
Yes.
it's hard for him. He probably can recall exactly how he felt. This is very much like, you know, it's interesting you mentioned like being a parent, or they say like, if you could help yourself, if you could write yourself a letter, you know, what would you tell yourself? And I remember like really painful moments, but now I realize I made them more painful for myself by making really stupid decisions. So yeah, the stranger knows more than his younger self, but he's kind of doling out the information a bit at a time. When it's like, when I think you're ready for that information, I'll tell you that information. But then that kind of assumes like he knows more, but does he know as much as the next person? So yeah. And I guess this gets back to my suspicion with Claudia, for instance, and Noah. Like they're sort of doing this to, like, Noah's doing it to Bartosz, Claudia's doing it to like Peter and Trant. You know, she's like, they're orchestrating people. And yeah, so I don't know. I think it is a cool scene, and like Jonas is trying to change the past. The stranger's like, no, you just got to let it play it out. But yet he's not. He's not doing that either. He has his own little plan.
Well, I guess he knows what he has to let play out and what he shouldn't. Maybe he's like picking and choosing as he goes. I don't know.
But back to what you said about the about like kind of the loop or whatever. Remember that the Sigmundus symbol and the figure 8, the upside down, the infinity, like is it linear? Because we've already established that like the past influences the future and the future influences the past.
Right.
So that's one thing I can say.
Sure. It just seems to me like things would happen once, and like if they start happening multiple times, then that would stop making sense. But I guess maybe our writers will will be as good on season 2 and 3 as they have been on season 1 and go that path. I'm not sure. One thing I am sure of is that Helge is a sweetheart because he left out some cookies and milk for Jonas. Did you notice that?
Those cookies and milk are there, Steve. I'm not sure if they're fresh or not.
They just B.A. Baracus Jonas. Jonas wakes up in this room, and then there's like milk and cookies and pine cones on the table. So obviously Helge left that there for whoever he has to kidnap.
Okay, so then middle-aged Helge, 1986, driving in a car, waiting at a stoplight. Ooh. He waits for the light to switch. A car swerves out of nowhere and smashes into him. And the song that's playing on the stereo is that weird 80s song.
Yeah.
And Nina. And the lyrics that were playing said, somehow the future starts somewhere sometime. Love is created by bravery, so don't think about it twice. We ride on fiery wheels toward the future through the night.
Yeah, that last stanza is what we're about here.
Yeah, the car smashes into him right after that line. riding on fiery wheels. Car is driven by old Helge.
This is another time travel-y, paradoxy mind blower. Great scene. It's played out so well, and I will remind you now that like every time when Helge is all like, you have to stop, of course he's talking about Noah, but he also could have been urging his younger self to not go because his older self knows how he's going to die. From this moment forward, when Helge stumbles out of that car, he's always going to know how he dies in that car wreck. So that's what made me think that those words had double meaning.
What do you mean he knows how he dies?
Well, that old Helge confronted him at his cabin, right? And said that I'm you. And then he gets in a car crash with that exact same guy. And that guy is the older Helge, and that guy is now dead. So obviously Helge is going to grow up and become that older guy.
You're saying the younger Helge, the younger middle-aged Helge.
From this point forward knows that.
Knows that he's going to die. But does he? Because he keeps saying, I can change the future and the past.
Right.
Well, when he's in the home.
Well, now we know that when he's repeating those words, he's just repeating the words that Ulrich was saying to him when he was little, because that's the exact words that Ulrich was saying to him.
Yeah. Well, that's the theory that I posited. That doesn't mean that's. Yeah. It depends on how you're reading that.
What? I think you're right about everything.
But does he actually believe he can do something? Or are we saying, no, he's just dement and mentally unstable? He doesn't know what he's saying.
It seems like he knows that it seems like he's trying to change things. That old Helge is jumping out of his bed trying to change things.
Yes. I'm not reading old Helge being fatalist, like, let me prepare for my death now. I'm reading it more like,
right.
I have to stop. He seemed to still think he could change things from happening, just like Jonas.
Yeah. So he's telling his younger self, stop doing all that stuff. And also, don't let me run into you at the stoplight because I'll die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he knows that if he's clear in his head, he knows he was manipulated by Noah. So I like to think of Helge being like, maybe if I can help myself see, I will no longer be Noah's puppet. Yeah. And so even the fact that he takes this action makes me proud of him, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess maybe old Helge ran into young Helge trying to kill him, to stop him. I have to stop myself. Yeah,
but instead, like every other character, he just
solidifies the future.
Made things worse. Exactly. So here, Charlotte, reads the article about Helge being in a car crash and receives a text from Peter who wants her to come to the cabin.
Yep, Peter listened to you and he texted her, so good job.
Just send a text, Peter. Just send a text. So then Noah and Bartosz... Oh, because here Charlotte also looked at this picture that said, what does Noah want? And now we cut to Noah and Bartosz talking in Noah's fancy car. And he shares that stranger Jonas believes he will close the black hole when, in fact, his actions are what lead to its existence in the first place. And I guess this is where I started to lose hope, Steve. Because it's like, because everybody thinks they can do something to help. And it's like, nope, you can't. We're all stuck. And Claudia is also working against them. There are two groups trying to control time, the light and shadow. And he assures Bartosz that they are on the light side.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, and Noah warns him about his grandmother, Claudia, and just says, don't believe anything that she says.
Yeah, so he's trying to say the shadow is like Claudia, and then by default, it must be Peter and Trant and Jonas. Mm-hmm. So we obviously don't believe that these people are the side of the shadow, because we've seen Noah do despicable things, and he talks about like how everybody else is like so immoral and awful when like he's the one that's like killing the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he mentions the kids, that they were just unfortunate casualties. Yeah.
Yeah, have some compassion, dude. Those were kids with lives. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And yeah, Bartosz now has the book in his hands at this point, because Noah hands the new looking book over to Bartosz, who's obviously in 2019 because he's, teenage Bartosz. Mm-hmm. So that means that Trant and Peter kind of have the same version of that book, except for, I guess, an older version, or maybe a different book altogether. But I'm leaning towards an older version of that book.
Yeah. Does this one have all the pages? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it looks like this one does have all the pages. It looks nice and new. And like you can see the spine has barely been cracked on it.
Mm-hmm. Stranger Jonas is in the Sic Mundus tunnel at the intersection of the 3 points. The machine starts working, and he looks down at the tunnel and sees the blood and oil covered face of Michael Conwald. Yeah, he thinks, I guess we could say the stranger thought here that he might die. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even think about that aspect. Yeah, I guess that's
like if
a
he's going to sit here and blow up a black hole.
Okay. Yeah, it didn't even occur to me. Okay.
Like it was sort of, it could be seen as like a suicide mission almost. So yeah, like sometimes before you think you're going to die, you see visions or whatever. So I guess I was thinking of it more of a vision than like that. Yeah. So he sees his father. But yeah, it's like there's other times where like Jonas sees visions of Mikkel, or he sees his father. And this is the stranger, who's also Jonas now, we know.
Right.
But this musical interlude here is what this is. And we see people in different time zones.
Right.
Which is wild. Inez and Mikkel outside their house in 1986. She's welcoming him home, I guess. Charlotte meeting Peter at the hatch in 2019. Yeah.
Finally embracing. Yeah.
Katarina's trying to call Ulrich, who's in jail in 1953, building the machine.
Right, yeah.
Doris and Agnes.
I'm going to back you up a little bit.
Sorry.
Yeah, Ulrich was in jail back in 1953, and then Tannhaus in his shop in 1953, checking out the lights too.
Yes. And Doris and Agnes in 1953.
The ladies.
Hannah in 2019, and here's the gun.
There it is. Don't do anything crazy with it, Hannah. I don't trust you anymore.
There's a couple other people we see too, Bernd and Greta, and then maybe somebody else. I don't know.
We see Magnus and...
oh, yeah, Magnus and Franziska.
Yeah, they're watching the Raider candy bar on TV.
Yeah, there's a commercial of like candy bars dancing around.
This song is really good and it fits the scene really well. I was wishing that Dan Deacon would have gotten the season ender, just because I'm a big fan of his. But this song was really good for this scene, and it took me a while to figure out like what year Stranger Jonas did this in. And judging from the outside of the cave, because I had to rewind a couple times to figure this out. He's doing this in 1986. Does that seem right to you as well? Because when he entered the cave, I didn't see the caution tape. I didn't see the gate. I didn't see the yellow chair. I just saw like just trees.
I don't know. I assumed it was 2019, but you could be right.
I assumed it was 2019
He was just
too.
in 1986 with Jonas, so that's another vote for that time period.
Sure, because when they pan up above his head, yeah, Jonas is up there.
And is the blue and white tape, what year is that? Is that 1986?
That was 2019.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think too much about it. I guess sort of it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't. I mean, it kind of does. It kind of does actually. But I'm going to lean on 86, judging from the ferns and the fact that Jonas is in the blue room above his head. Really interesting. The fact that like that makes the most sense too. He went over there, talked to Jonas in the blue room. You know, you got to stay here. Now I'm going to go around to the other side and go into the cave. Same time period.
Yeah. But yeah, the lyrics here are good, like you mentioned. It says, maybe this time I'll outwit my past. I thought I have been given another chance again, but heaven lies as usual. I repented, but in vain.
But in
tries
vain.
to cheat me out of my good aim. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, we didn't mention too.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you were going to ask about any what?
Well, I was just, you said, I forgot about, I repented but in vain. And I was like, yeah, that's like nothing is in vain. But there, in this lyric, it's saying it is in vain.
Oh, okay. Well, again, with the dual perspectives, I suppose, you know?
Yeah.
I guess Claudia. We see Claudia in this thing too. And we see a really weird Claudia. We see like older Claudia, but it's like it's snowing or something, and she has this big gun in her hand.
Yeah, like that. I don't think that's snow. Because we saw it also at the end.
Is it nuclear fallout or something?
Yeah, I think it's like blast dust.
I always thought that blast dust was like toxic and could kill you on sight, but I guess not. Or who knows what it is.
I mean,
but
it depends on how far it's coming in. Like they talked about this in that series Chernobyl.
Right. That's right.
You know, you could get so close and have it not be dangerous. Once you got like to a certain like parameter or area of proximity,
right,
then it was dangerous, but you might still have like residue or debris in the air that's like milling about.
Yeah, so I guess this is like Claudia is in that same time frame that Jonas is in, like later in the episode. It just it looks really out of whack with the rest of this episode when we see Claudia there. So it was just kind of confusing for a moment there. But yeah, more stuff happens here. I'm not going to interrupt you anymore.
Yeah. No, that's fine. It's not interruption. It's conversation.
Oh, thank you.
So then we are in two time periods at once, 1986 and 1953. Young Helge is in the bunker in 1953. He clutches the Pfennig coin and he counts quietly under his breath, which he was doing before, like when he was riding his bike and closing his eyes. And Jonas is in the blue wallpaper room in 1986. And one of those portals opens up like we had before, and they see each other and touch hands, and they're both transported. And Helge wakes up in 1986. And so this is actually how Helge got to 1986. The scene, they're repeating the scene that we saw him in when we first saw Helge. Yeah,
that answers that question, but then it still doesn't answer the question, like, how does that even make sense? Because Helge, middle-aged Helge, is also in 1986.
Right. But we've already established we can have two versions of something in the same time period.
Heck yes, we can.
The two timings, the two books. the two Helges. Yeah.
I was just trying to like make sense. I was just trying to put, I was just trying to see where young Helge goes from here. And obviously we don't know. Some growing up has to happen. So season 2 is upon us.
Yeah. So this, before we go to the cliffhanger, about Helge here, what I think I want to say about this is that there's this Helge and Noah have been doing these experiments, right? To send boys to the future, the past. So they want to find a safe way to transport people from point A to point B, or time A to time B.
Right.
The stranger tells Jonas sort of post haste or after the fact that it's the room. It's this room has all this energy. And how I'm reading this is this event that Jonas and Helge, this interaction of them, they have been trying to repeat this. This is what they're trying to repeat. And so Helge is almost like the magical boy or the special chosen boy,
Sure.
He makes it from one time period to another. And they're like, okay, we need to... It's kind of like you're doing an experiment. You're like, okay, it worked once. So how can we repeat this again?
Oh. So
they've been trying to repeat this success.
Okay.
And which is why they're using only boys, smaller boys, and then maybe like somebody died. And then they're like, well, let's try a slightly older boy, Eric.
Yeah.
To see if he can survive.
Yeah, I didn't even... Yeah. That's great. Okay, because we know it's not necessarily the room; it's really the machine that's doing all the manipulation down there. I guess from the future, and so therefore they think that this room does this. Helge was the first traveler. That's why Noah takes such a special interest in Helge. Mm-hmm. And yeah, wow. I didn't even think about that aspect that like Helge is like patient zero then in that respect.
Yeah, remember when older Helge says to middle-aged Helge, you aren't the chosen one, he's not the chosen one. Like Noah has probably told Helge, like, you're special, you are the one that God chose, and you survived. So yeah, and he was looking. You remember he was looking at his picture at his mom's house, like, there he is, special boy.
And this explains why Helge, our special boy, is so susceptible to Noah's bullshit, because he's traveled through time and he's seen it happen. He had this experience with Jonas when he was young, so he knows there's more to life than just what we see. So he's probably really susceptible to this double talk because he's seen some stuff already.
Yeah, and he's also didn't get much love and attention, and he was mistreated. So,
well, sure, there's that, but like when Noah starts talking about stuff like fate and like religion and like big things, like he can refer back to that experience with Helge. It's like an easy thing to like glom onto, like, don't you remember?
Yeah.
You're the guy.
God chose you for this purpose. Yeah.
Even though God doesn't exist in Noah's eyes, but still.
He knows how to manipulate people using that, or that concept. So.
Yeah, good call there. I like that.
Okay, so then Helge jumped 33 years into the future. And so, energy must be transferred. Jonas does the same thing. He also jumps to the future. He's transported to the bunker again, but it's in a different time period that we've seen, but we didn't know when it was. and it's this future of 2053.
Right. And the bunker is like a real bunker again. It's like another war bunker once again.
Yeah. And it's got all the pictures with the thread. It's got the murder board.
Right. That's how we know this is the future from the get-go. I was a little confused first watch, like what year Jonas woke up. Mm-hmm. But like the pictures should have given me my first clue.
Yeah. And he sees a picture of himself to the stranger, which is that line is done with red thread.
Oh, of course.
And there's the sounds of fighter planes, and Jonas walks outside to find a bleak landscape. There's no vegetation whatsoever.
None.
And there's some vehicles that drive up and people holding weapons, and Jonas asks his favorite question, what year is it? And gets a gun butt to the head from this young lady with a scar across her face.
Yeah. So how does she know that he's from the past? Because she's like, welcome to the future. How does she know? She must have a pretty good sense of belonging, I suppose.
Yeah, well, maybe she's been prepared.
Oh, absolutely. I thought that
watch out for weirdos that.
Yeah, some kind of yellow raincoat and possibly a priest might come by here. So if they do, capture them. Mm-hmm. I thought she looked a lot like Francisca, this character, this female character.
I see that.
Because we don't know any of them. I looked at them a whole bunch, and these aren't any characters we know at this point, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that was my first thought, is that she looked kind of like Fran. Because at first I thought maybe it was her, but I was like, no, that's definitely not her, Steve. Get a hold of yourself. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is going to lead us into season 2, and we'll be entering in some brand new territory for Heather, because Heather's never seen beyond season 1, and hopefully some of these listeners listening haven't either. So we'll all be in for some more great stuff.
Whoa. Well, what? I'm curious. What happened with Heather after season 1? Like, why did she stop? Did it not grab her?
Yeah, not really. Like, she likes the show. She enjoys watching it with me and talking about it, but I don't think she loves it as much as you and I do.
Okay.
Because if she did, she would have continued watching, I guess. I think the language barrier is a little tough from her perspective, because watching it in German is difficult, and watching it in English makes it like, about 5% hokier, I suppose.
Heather, you're still okay with me because I know you watched 1899, so I still consider you a loyalist.
She is, and she'll be watching this with me. I mean, I'm going to make her. We do watch some shows separately. Like right now, she's watching Manifest, and I don't really have any interest in that. And I'm watching Servant, which is an amazing show, and she's lost interest in it already too. So, we diverge at some points. I don't have any closing thoughts at this point. Do you, before we get into our superlatives?
I guess overall, I would just say that I think that this is a very strong season overall. We learned about all the 4 families. We learned the laws of time travel, and each of the characters has this central conflict. And I think we leave season 1 with this idea that has been implanted several times, which is getting caught up in a story and not interfering versus trying to impose your will upon what happens.
Right.
And we have these 2 groups that represent these 2 different camps. And I guess a question I want to ask you, Steve, that I think is interesting is, which group do you think seems happier? Team, like, let things go, unravel as they need to, or I can change the past.
Whew.
And I mean, happiness isn't everything, but I think sometimes it is the secret to inner peace is having contentment in what you're doing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Big stuff. I feel a big connection to H.G. Tannhaus, especially like in the last 2 episodes, with a lot of his dialogue. But the central piece of dialogue that I really like is, you know, he knows his place, and he is there to do his part, and he is going to allow things to happen. And, you know, life is a puzzle that he can't figure out, and he doesn't know why it's even there, but he's a part of it. And so I kind of latch onto that a lot, onto that philosophy. So it kind of sounds like I'm on team, like, let things happen as they are supposed to. But I don't really know what team that is at this point. And, like, which team seems happier? Like, both teams seem really miserable in every respect. Like...
But do they, like, okay, so here's who I have on which team.
Okay.
Characters like Jonas, Ulrich, and Helge, who believe they can change things.
Okay.
But it creates more chaos. And then on the other hand, you have characters like Tannhaus, who you mentioned, Inez, and Claudia, that promote the idea of not interfering or trying to impose your will upon what happens.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yes, I'm absolutely on team Tannhaus. Then in that respect, because I mean I really enjoy watching, you know, Jonas and Ulrich running around doing their thing, but yeah, I think they are in danger of doing more harm than good. And I'm on team allow things to happen, even though that, you know, we know that some bad things happen. I mean, bad things happen to everybody every day. Not to say that's justified, but there's no team that's going to always be sunshine, happiness, and nobody's going to die ever. I mean, that team doesn't exist. So I would choose the Tannhaus team above Jonas' team 100%.
I think that perspective, I just think that perspective is interesting to think about, because I'm the same as you. I think when you're always trying to exert your will and make things happen, that can often be very frustrating. And I mean, that's kind of my default mode, is I can be, you know, controlling and, you know, kind of like try to get people to understand why they need to do what I think they should do. But yeah, at the end of the day, when you can kind of see, like, Inez, Tannhaus, maybe not Claudia. I'm still skeptical of her, but Tannhaus and Inez, I would say both of them have a level of inner peace, like with what's going on around them. They're not saying like it's all great, but they also are like, you know, who am I to decide? You know, maybe good can come out of this, and like being content. You know, there's a passage in the Bible, being content in all seasons, that you can find, no matter what's going on around you, you can find an inner space for yourself to exist that doesn't feel like you're being put upon. And I like that idea, but maybe it wouldn't make a very interesting show to have a bunch of people like kumbaya holding hands. So we need the characters like Jonas and Ulrich to liven things up, right?
Right. Yeah, we need those kind of people in our lives, too, to make things happen. Because if we were all passive and just let things happen, then nothing would happen. So, you know, we need both people in the world. So I'm sure there's people out there listening that are like, you know, no, you got to make changes. You got to take action. You got to, you know, grab hold of your life and grab it by the horns. And you can't argue with that person, because they might exemplify that in their life and make good things happen. People do that every day. But yeah, from this time traveling perspective.
Yeah. I guess I want to push up just about that idea really quickly.
Sure.
I don't think that's necessarily being passive. You could do it that way, but there's a way that you can achieve inner peace without being passive, you know. It doesn't, I just wanted to like stand up for that concept. But yes, we need people to like move and, you know, be movers and shakers and to take action. I can be action oriented too, but I guess like when your sense of happiness and peace is determined by what someone else does, and if this particular thing happens exactly like I want it to, that's a very frustrating place to exist as well.
Yeah. Yeah, good call. And Lindsay, I guess you had a really good idea. Instead of saying who we think is our favorite in this episode, you suggested giving our number ones for the whole season, because I think it'd be really hard to do both at this point.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and go?
Okay, sure. Would you like me to start with my least, or I'll decide that? Okay. All right. There's two guys, two white men that have been eyeballing this whole season. And I chose one for my favorite and one for my least. And I'm going to start with my favorite.
Ooh,
and
okay.
Now that we know that Jonas is the stranger, and every time we saw stranger, that was Jonas, with that fact in play, I have to give it to our boy Jonas in his yellow raincoat, because this episode, like I said, it contains like one of my favorite scenes of this whole show, and maybe like one of my top 10 scenes of all time of all shows, is the scene where Jonas is meeting himself in the bunker. It brings out a lot in me, and I just love that perspective, and I love the way both guys played it. Both actors played it so well. And my other two favorite scenes in this episode were the stranger and H.G. Tannhaus sitting in the shop nerding out about the time machine, all the clicks and noises and the realization and the conversation. And of course, that's Jonas. So one more for Jonas. My third favorite scene of this episode was when Jonas and Helge, touched fingers, and they, both flipped time through that rip in time. So there's Jonas once again showing up in all my favorite scenes. So how can I not say he's my favorite? I mean, he's our central character. He doesn't always represent my favorite in some scenes. Like, I'm really skeptical and kind of like crossing my arms and like, what's up? Like in this episode, the scene with Hannah when he's like giving her the hug and telling her everything's going to be okay. I thought that was a weird scene, and that didn't portray the best of Jonas. But the smile he gave Hannah towards the end sure did. So yeah, I'll just wrap it up and say Jonas, my boy, the boy of the episode and the season. So okay. With that, I'm going to go to your favorite then, if you don't mind.
My favorite character of season 1 is Ulrich.
Ulrich, my man. All right. Because he's a metalhead?
No. Ulrich, yeah. I think just his whole arc, I just think it's one of the wildest arcs of this season. And he makes a lot of questionable decisions, but I'm never bored and
that's true.
I think he's also just the person I feel like, he really gets the short end of the stick.
Oh yeah.
Overall, with just how he's. He goes trying to save his son. He keeps getting screwed over by Egon Tiedemann.
Yeah, his arch nemesis.
Yeah. And I just like I like their interactions, he and Egon, how there's this eternal battle between the two of them at all times. So I'm gonna say Ulrich, even though it's not like I like him. I mean, I've certainly given him a lot of crap this season. He's not as hot as Alexander or Magnus. He's not as sweet as Mikkel, but he's the most fun to watch.
Yeah.
And he goes through a wild roller coaster ride this season, and that's why I'm giving my award to Ulrich.
Very cool. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Never a dull moment with Ulrich. He's always something going on. Always running around doing some scampy stuff. And I told you that there was two white men that I had my eye on this whole season, and I gave one the best and one the worst. And well, the guy I decided to give my worst is also a guy I really enjoy watching a lot, who runs around and is half crazy, and he smashes kids' heads in with rock, and that would be Ulrich. I put Ulrich as my number one bad guy.
Oh no!
Because I really do like him. But at the same time, he's so frustrating as a character, and he makes the wrong choices many times, and it seems like the wrong choices he makes like directly affect other people's lives in negative ways. So he seems like a unknowingly bad guy. That he doesn't realize these bad tracks he's laying, but he's so great to watch. And I know his spirit is in the right place too. Like, I know he's not like an evil person. Like, I know he even loves Katerina as well. You can just tell that by his person, but he makes these wrong choices, and these big wrong choices. So that's why he deserves like my season ender number one up there with Jonah. And I'm going to take a wild guess. No, I'm not even going to guess who your worst is. I kind of have an idea of who it is, but...
Oh, geez. Okay.
Am
I that predictable?
What's that?
I said, am I that predictable?
I don't know. You've surprised me almost every time. You surprised me with the Ulrich right there. So no, you're not predictable at all.
Oh, okay. Good. All right. My least favorite is... I feel terrible, but I'm going to have to give it to Noah.
Oh, that's who I thought it was. I already wrote down Noah for you.
Oh, gosh.
So you are predictable.
Steve, okay, tell me why you thought I was going to pick Noah.
Well, he makes these big speeches, and he does like the exact opposite of like his speeches. Like, you know he's completely insincere. Like, every word he says is like self-serving, and he talks about like immorality when he's probably like the most immoral person we've seen so far. So those are the reasons that I would guess.
You've done all my work for me. I mean, that's pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I think he's a bully. He's misusing the cloth here, his religious cloth.
That's right, stolen valor. I didn't even think about that. It's so obvious, but I never even thought about that.
He just comes across as creepy and like a bully, and he's a liar, and he's, trying to turn Bartosz. He's sort of isolating Bartosz from everybody he cares about. Perfect. I don't know, what do they call this when you...
Grooming?
You isolate somebody from everybody.
He's grooming them.
Yeah, grooming him. Exactly. He's grooming him. He groomed Helge.
Yeah.
And yeah, just he's certainly, again, just like Ulrich, he's certainly like a presence, on the screen.
Oh yeah.
Whenever he's there, you're like, the musical cues are outrageous for Noah. It's always like the best musical cues, and he's got that great tattoo and the great chest muscles.
Well, those are good things about him, though. Wait a second.
Yeah, but I mean, he's the person that I would trust least with puppies or children.
In that respect, yeah, I would agree 100%. Like, I would trust Ulrich way more than I would trust Noah.
Yeah, if I was gonna have any of these characters babysit my cat or my nephew, the last person I would choose would be Noah.
Absolutely. Or maybe Claudia, because she's gonna lose your pet.
So yeah.
Man, I can't wait to see all these guys next season. I don't think we lose anybody. I'm trying to think about the next season, and all the characters come back, right? Everybody who's alive anyway. Well, even the dead ones come back in some respect.
I mean, Michael/Mickle.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Oh, I hope we get to see a lot more of... We barely got to meet adult Michael, and he would be a nice person to get to know a little bit more, because we don't know any of like his motives or his thoughts, and he's Mickle, so we should be loving him. So he'd be a welcome character to get to know more stuff about.
Mm-hmm. I also like this scene with, young Charlotte. I would like to see some more young Charlotte, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I guess we will, because she's going to grow up, so she doesn't die as a child, so that's good news. But rock and roll, Lindsay, I guess we're going to wrap it up here. We have hit over 2 hours now. Mm-hmm. We are going to be back, though, with Season 2. I think next week we're going to take a break from Dark, and James and myself are going to do some Robert Jordan stuff. We're going to recap some Wheel of Time news, and we're going to watch Conan the Destroyer. It's going to be a short episode, probably less than an hour. But then the week after that, we'll be right back with Season 2 of Dark with Lindsay. And I hope you know by now that you can follow all these recaps along online at Lindsay's website, which is oneofmystories.com. And she also makes YouTubes of these videos as well. And Lindsay, did you have any closing thoughts for us?
Closing thoughts. I hope you will come back for Season 2 and write us some email. And that's at Sweet Child of Time Pod. Steve, help me out here.
Hey, you almost did it. sweetchildoftimepod@gmail.com.
Yeah. Write us some emails about, if you're a regular listener, we'd like to hear, tell us what you like best about what we're doing so we can do more of that. We'd love to hear your suggestions so we can make sure we're putting out the content you like, even though we think you like our content because you're listening to all of our episodes.
Yeah, right on. Thank you for doing so. And I hope everybody finds water and shade where they're at. And Lindsay, I hope you also find water and shade.
Steve, I hope you find water, shade, and a radioactive isotope of your own whenever you need it. Plenty of CS-137.
Yay. Back in time. Thank you, Lindsay. Until next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.